Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 13. Well, this one will be back to normal after the power issues are taken care of. We will try our best to keep expanding the ring of towers around the planet equator, but we are starting to run up against the other end of the starter base, so we are reaching the point where we need to make some decisions about what to do with the old stuff. Thankfully, we won't have to make it today, but we might have to in the next one. But apart from all that, we will also do something new. It's all nice that we have the power sorted for now, but we are still leaving a lot of potential capacity on the table. There is a way to extend the life of our fuel cells quite considerably, and you better believe that we will try to tap into that potential today. Before we get started, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel, and clicking the like button will let me know that this video was worth making. If you want to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them, and for a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. But enough talking, let's get into it. I already knew that the foundation factories are struggling with the bricks, so we need to expand on that one. Good thing we had an unexploited patch of stone nearby, so we can feed that into the brick furnaces. If we move the acid line over a little, we should be able to cover that last node. Okay, that should ensure the continuity of the foundation production. We will need a lot of them before we are through with this planet. I also changed my mind about these generators. They would be best suited to be singular units. Stacking them just limits their potential for picking up random stuff from the belts. Plus they are currently hooked into the power network of the farm, and the demand is very low and intermittent there. They will be a lot more useful if they are part of the main base instead. Okay, time to deal with that extra power I talked about in the intro. It will come in the form of proliferators. They are the DSP version of the modules from Factorio. Here, it's a bit simpler. In this game we have these sprays, which we can apply to different products, and if those get fed into different machines, we will get all sorts of bonuses. In the case of regular manufacturing components, we will be able to either speed up the crafting process, or increase the efficiency of the materials used, and create extra products at the other end. The effect is decided by the machine that uses the proliferated items. In the case of power generators, like our handy new fusion reactors, they will consume the fuel rod slower, and they will also generate more. If I remember correctly, both aspects are boosted by 25%, so it's not an unsubstantial increase. Very much worth the investment. Just like many other items in the game, these proliferators also come in different versions, from Mark 1 to Mark 3, and each upgrade needs a little bit of the previous tier. Now, we really shouldn't bother with the Mark 1 and 2 sprays, the Mark 3 is where it's at. We just place down a small row of assemblers, each making a different tier of them, feeding into each other, and we will put the final Mark 3s into a box to have a stockpile. The Mark 1 is the simplest, it just needs a bit of coal to make. Mark 2s are a step up, they need diamonds, which we just happen to be able to make out of coal, so we feed that through a pair of furnaces. The first one makes graphite from the coal, and the second makes the diamonds from the graphite. Easy peasy. The last one is a tiny bit more tricky, that needs carbon nanotubes to be made. At this moment in time, we only need a pair of chemical labs to make those. Let me quickly make them, we only have one at hand. I made some extra, we will need them for the acid production too. So, this one is fairly simple now that we have a source of fire ice from the nearby gas giant. We can use those to make graphene in a single step, and then we just combine those with some titanium in the second lab to make the nanotubes. Oh, right. A byproduct of using fire ice is hydrogen. We can just feed that back into the tower, and it will get shipped off to the deuterium refinery. Next, we dump all the Mark III proliferators into a chest for later use. Next, we need the spray coaters. They are what applies the proliferation effect onto the different items. That will be plenty enough for the near future. Basically, proliferators are a form of space-saving measure, and they are extremely useful for cramming the same amount of production into a smaller area. But if there is one thing we have a lot of in this game, it's space. We will not use these proliferators in massive quantities, it will be very situational, like the power generation right now. Anyways, to coat the items, we place the sprayers onto belts, and anything passing under them will get the desired boost. Even the proliferators themselves can be proliferated. That way, they will use less of the stuff to spray more items. Alright. We have everything ready. The thing is, all the fuel currently inside the reactors and on the belts are still not sprayed. If we quickly rebuild everything, we will ensure that we take advantage of the boost as soon as possible. Great. The rods inside the reactors are now 25% more efficient than before, both in terms of power generation and fuel efficiency. Next, we really need to deal with the acid production. That's what is holding back the fuel rod production right now, and we really need those to flow as freely as possible. Thankfully, there is plenty of room just above the titanium crystal area, so we can just continue with the existing belts, and make all the acid that we need. That should be more than what we need to ensure a continuous fuel rod production. But, I did notice that the raw stone belt is a bit sparse. Let's check on that. Upgrading the mines with Mark III belts will surely fix the issue. Some of the reactors had unproliferated fuel in them. I suppose the power outage while we rebuilt them disrupted the spray coater. No matter, at this point we will just let them carry on, they will get sorted out by themselves over time. Well, I think it's time to continue building the ring of towers around the equator. I suppose we can deal with the processors next. If you remember, they are a two-step production. First we need the microcrystalline components, and then those can be turned into the processors themselves. And I got tired of continuously moving this oil belt, so we will just route it in a gap between the towers instead. With the microcrystalline components dealt with, we can tackle the processors next. Once again, I failed to check the correct ratio, but these are not the final setups anyway. They are just the penultimate versions. Very good. We have a source of processors on the logistics network now. Let's see what's next. The organic crystals ceased being made, all the refined oil goes to the acid labs. Well, if we feed the end of that line into the organic crystals instead, we should be able to make a temporary fix for this situation. We have a decent amount of it stored up, so it will last us a little while, but I would rest easier if we had a proper source of oil at this point. Only, our hydrogen harvesters on our ice giant are not numerous enough to make the change. Also, I should really think about giving these planets a proper name soon. I'm tired of referring to the planets in descriptive terms. It would be much nicer if they had proper names. I won't do it today, but I will likely do it in the next episode. I was thinking Zeus for the ice giant, since Jupiter is taken already, and then use the Roman names for the children of Jupiter. If I remember correctly, that is the naming convention we used for the moons around the real-life solar system. We named the planets after the Roman gods, but gave their moons the names of Greek deities, all related to the parent planet. Take Mars for example. He is the Roman version of Ares, the god of warfare. But its moons are Phobos and Deimos, who were the sons of Ares. Basically, we will switch this naming convention, and use Greek names for the planets, and Roman names for the moons. At least that's my plan at the moment. But this will only apply to the starter star system. Later on, we will dedicate single planets to making a single product, and at that time we will just name the planets after what they are making. We will not have the luxury to be fancy. but in our home system, we can indulge ourselves a little. Anyways, what I did next was the emptying of the dark fog farm. It's not high level enough to bother with an intricate sorting system, we will just come around periodically to stash everything into these towers by hand. Plus, this farm isn't long for this world if I'm honest. It's right on the equator, and the space it takes up could be better utilized for the towers. We will likely set up another farm on one of the other planets. Before we move on to the next tower, I decided to double up on the microcrystalline components. We will need some extra for other stuff, they aren't just used for processors, so having the extra won't hurt. You know what? Let's do the same for the processors too. We will need those in massive quantities anyway, so might as well. And I cannot stress enough just how better the game is with the blueprint feature. Before it was added, we had to do everything by hand. Those were dark days for people with carpal tunnel syndrome, let me tell you. We have a pretty big amount of space for this next tower. And since chemical labs tend to take up a lot of room, we will use this tower to make the graphene. Thankfully, we no longer need to deal with the prerequisites. We have fire ice coming in from the gas giant, which means that we can make that stuff from it directly. The only issue is the excess hydrogen production. The saving grace for that one is that the gas harvesters are picked up by logistic vessels, while all deliveries on a single planet are all handled by drones. Since drones have a smaller cargo hold than vessels, they get priority for deliveries. So any hydrogen we make on the planet will get used up first, and we only use the gas giant as a secondary source. This should be a good enough belt arrangement. The singular lanes will be used to deliver the fire ice to the labs, while the ones that are double-tracked will take the graphene and hydrogen back to the tower for shipping. It is also important to separate the two. If for whatever reason one of them reached the point of fully stocking the tower, they will inevitably plug up the belts carrying that stuff. If we just shoved both on the same, one of them would end up blocking the intake of the other. This blockage will likely happen with the hydrogen, which would block the flow of graphene, and that's the primary product of this tower. Obviously, if that happens, it will still back up into the chemical labs, but at least we can give ourselves a bit more room for error with having them on separate belts. And we are out of labs. I would like to finish setting this up, so let's make some more before we move on. "24 labs making graphene. We will need to do a lot more than this eventually, but for our current needs, this is plenty enough." It seems the fusion reactors managed to catch up on proliferation, and all the fuel rods are now coated with the Mark III sprays. You can tell by those tiny orange arrows on the item pictures, by the way, in case you were wondering. One arrow would mean Mark I proliferation, 2 for 2, and 3 is the best we can achieve. Well, here I think I made a small miscalculation. Instead of continuing with the component towers, I ended up going for a research one. At least that's the conclusion I arrived at, which I will put into practice in a little bit, but there was a new dark fog base on the planet that needed some attention. I wonder what would happen if we coated the missiles with the proliferators. I wouldn't say no to some extra damage, or faster travel speed. We'll have to check at some point what the effect is. Here, I took advantage of a relatively recent addition to the game. On the map screen, we can change the way the resource amounts are displayed on the side of the screen. We can do it in 3 ways. The default, where it shows the overall amount of raw materials present in the deposits. Or we can show how much we have under extraction at the moment, basically showing what we can expect with the current coverage. And the third, where it shows the amount still not covered by miners. That's what we can use to ensure we leave nothing untapped. With that mode selected, I went around, and took care of all the remaining iron and copper deposits on our home planet. This is the last patch of iron on this planet that is still not being mined. Let's change that real quick. Very nice. We have no more iron nodes anywhere that are not covered by a miner. But we still have some copper left. It's just a matter of looking around until we find it. While these belts were being built, I took a quick look at our research, and added all the construction drone and logistics upgrades I could find. And that's that for the iron and copper. We had 0 silicon or titanium to begin with, but we still have a buttload of stone and coal all over the place. Those will have to wait, I'm afraid. Maybe once we have the advanced miners we will worry about those. And this is where I put that miscalculation I mentioned earlier into practice. There really is no need to do this right now, and if I'm honest, I really shouldn't waste space on the equator for research. That kind of stuff is better handled on the poles. I think in the next episode, we will rip this one up, and replace it with something a lot more useful, namely the final oil refinery tower. Also, we just started seeing a dip in power again. Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. We did do a lot of building today after all. Thankfully, with the proliferated fuel rods, and the easy access to more reactors, we can just keep expanding the array when we really need to. As for the research, it's not all that different from other production towers. They need the same kind of resources. We still need to feed the finished products back into the tower for shipping. It's just a question of how big the matrix labs are. Well, we are out of labs. Nothing a quick scavenger hunt cannot fix. But as I've said, don't get too attached to this one. We will rip it up in the next episode, and replace it with a densely packed array of oil refineries. The extra matrix labs will come in handy though. I do want to move the research to one of the poles in the near future. Well, this would be great for what we need for research at the moment, but as I keep saying, it will have to move eventually. For now, we can feed the cubes into the consumer labs through the logistics network. See that coal deposit nearby? It is perfectly placed to be used in the oil refining process once we take out the matrix labs. The final refining process requires coal, where we can take the output of the original process we used, feed them into another refinery set to another process, and combine that with a single piece of coal to get an extra refined oil out of it. Basically, we can combine the hydrogen and the coal to make more refined oil. This will result in a process that is completely free of unwanted byproducts. You might also be wondering why I didn't go and place those gas harvesters I occasionally put into my inventory. Well, placing them is very time consuming, mostly thanks to the travel speed of our construction drones. Once we are done with the next speed upgrade, we will put them down, but doing them now would be a bit of a pain. And speaking of which, I noticed that the assembler stopped making them. Let's do a bit of troubleshooting before we say goodbye. There were no batteries to use, and that was because we had no more blue magnets ready to make those. And as it turns out, those were lacking because there were not enough green motors around. As for those were out of stock because there wasn't enough magnetic rings available, which were halted because there is not enough copper. Well, we got to the source of the issue in the end. Now, the reason for the lack of copper was mostly down to the lack of raw ore. The thing is, we are already using all the copper deposits on this planet, so the only way to get more is from one of our neighbors. For good measure, I expanded the overall production capacity before we ship in more ore. We also have a dark fog outpost off-world that is starting to become a bit antsy, so that one will also need to be taken down a peg. Nice. Logistics bots are now even faster than before. But they are nowhere near their full potential. Well, I think we are ready to go. First we take care of that problematic dark fog outpost, and then we can deal with the copper. There. The outpost is pacified, we can move on. Between the two potential planets for a copper outpost, the red one had more overall amount, so we should try to use that for it. Also love how we can afford to speed up a lot more on our interplanetary trips now. These new fuel cells are pretty great. Now we just need an area pretty rich in copper, and we can start mining. For now, we will leave the tower without power. The one on our home planet can deal with the importing of the ores. Okay, we are way over time at this point. We can pick things up right here in the next one. So, let's see what's in store. As I've said, we will likely rip up that Matrix lab tower we built today, and replace it with one that will make oil for us. I already have a layout in mind, I've been using it for ages, and it is yet to let me down. After that is dealt with, we have two things we can do. One of which is a proper research setup around one of the poles on our home planet. That place is usually where I do my cube manufacturing. The other avenue we can go down is the slow dismantling of the starter base. We have a lot of the materials already present on the logistics network, so we can get started. Which also means that we can start thinking about setting up the final mall, where we ship in the raw materials, and create all the buildings and infrastructure needed to keep expanding. So much work left to do, but we are slowly getting closer to our end goal. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. And clicking the like button will also help letting me know that the video was worth making. If you would like to help me make a living off this one day, please consider becoming a channel member, where you will get an early access to the videos as I make them. And if you want to give a one-time donation, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description. Thank you for your support, and I will see you in the next one.